Ah, the Buffalo Bills. A franchise filled with history, culture, and one of the craziest fan bases in all of professional sports. This Bills Mafia has seen its share of heartbreak, coach and quarterback carousels, droughts, and more heartbreak. From the AFL-NFL merger to present day, it's hard to believe that there was a time where the Bills were not a part of Western New York. Well, what if I told you that the Buffalo Bills were not the first team to play professional football in Western New York? That team just so happened to be the Tonawanda Kardex. For those of you who are not from the Buffalo area, Tonawanda is a suburb outside of Buffalo, New York, and it just so happens to be home of the very first professional football team to grace the Western New York area. The Cardex began their reign on the professional football world in 1916, which at the time were known as the All-Tonawanda All-Stars. Now, ladies and gentlemen, do bear with me. This team literally changed their name to some slight variation each and every single year. I mean, they're basically like the Prince of the early NFL days. But for the rest of the video, we will just let them be known as the Tonawanda Kardex. Now, anyway, pro football wasn't exactly how we know it today. Most teams were sponsored by local companies in the area, where said company or sponsor would literally pay for everything. So they paid for the formation of the team, they'd pay the players, they'd pay the publicity for when they had home games, they paid for security, and the only way to break even was to ensure that you put butts in seats. So, say for example that attendance was low, or God forbid it rained one of those days and the game had to be canceled, your team could go defunct literally overnight. It's a huge reason why a lot of early NFL teams did exactly that. Now, the American Cardex company just so happened to be the sponsor of the Tonawanda Kardex, and forming the team was a bit interesting. They weren't scouting the SEC or the Pac-12 for top talent. This was literally a tryout in Tonawanda, New York. Just imagine some of the dudes that showed up for that day. But after grueling tryouts, I'm sure, the team was finalized. And their leader, you might ask? Walter Tam Rose. Walter was a Syracuse University football standout and served as the very first head coach of the Tonawanda Kardex. And get this, their running back as well. I mean, we're all sitting here worried about Sean McDermott being head coach and defensive coordinator this year. Throw some pads on, Shawnee. Get in the game. Anyway, with Tonawanda during the early days played all of their home games at Tonawanda High School, which is absolutely wild if you think about it, because some of those games were reported to have 3,500 people in attendance. Unfortunately, there wasn't really a lot of consistency in the overall structure of the schedules. It sort of seemed like they'd make a call directly after their last game and see if they can invite somebody else to come just 4 or 5 days later. It's very, very spur of the moment. For example, in 1916, the Cardex went 1-2, 1917, 2-3, and 1919, 2-1. And all of these seasons were played in the New York Professional Football League before they ended up absolutely balling out the year after, before they were ultimately invited into the American Professional Football Association, which as we know of today, the NFL. Now, first couple of years were pretty mid, I'm not gonna lie to you, but 1920 was when they put on a damn show, finishing 7-1 on that season. And most notably, fun fact, in 1920, they played the very first football game on Thanksgiving against the team in Rochester, which essentially created the tradition of having a football game on Thanksgiving. So now, from anybody from the Buffalo area, if you just want to sit there and flex on some of your friends, Buffalo and Tonawanda were a part of the very first Thanksgiving game to ever be played by a professional football organization. But 7-1 was very impressive, and the rest of the football world recognized it and invited us into the NFL. Now, we were one of 4 teams invited, and those teams just so happen to be the Cardex, of course, the Minneapolis Marines, the Evansville Crimson Giants, and the Green Bay Packers. And 1921 was their very first year in the NFL. Unfortunately, it was not a happy ending. But before I rip up old wounds for Western New York, I do need to give a giant shout out to today's sponsor, and that just so happens to be the Manta Sleep Mask. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but I have a very difficult time getting sufficient sleep at night. My mind is always racing, I'm tossing and turning, and me achieving REM sleep is absolutely impossible. That's until I found this thing right here. This mask, let me tell you, is one of the most comfortable sleep masks I have ever dealt with in my entire life. Literally not a drop of light gets through this thing, and the quality of sleep that I've been getting for the past couple of weeks has really paid its dividends as far as my overall workday is concerned. It's a great investment, very comfortable, and really allows you to take advantage of one of the most important things that you need to take care of, and that is your sleep. If interested, I highly recommend going to check out their website. That link is in my description, and make sure you use my code to get an additional 10% off. You will thank me later. So coming off of a successful 1920 season, there was no way that the Tonawanda Kardex were going to go out there and be a bunch of scrubs. Clearly, a championship was being brought to Western New York, right? No. As the Cardex played one game against the Rochester Jeffersons and lost 45-0. Yes, I said 45-0. As you can imagine, the headlines were not too kind. The Jeffersons trounced Tonawanda 45-0. So apparently this running back from Rochester, his name was the Purple Streak, threw for 2 touchdowns, rushed for another, and kicked a field goal. This man beat the Cardex by himself. And so apparently we had like a couple of decent stands in the first quarter and the third quarter, but overall a piss poor performance. And so I'm not even sure what somebody from the 1920s would say about that game when they're talking to their boys about what happened last night. Golly gee, the Cardex sure got walloped last night. But other than that, I will just let our imaginations run wild. The saddest part of this story is that that was their last game ever. Yes, I said that. Their last game ever. The team went completely defunct and never played again, donning the title of being the shortest-lived NFL organization of all time at just one game. Now, no one really knows what happened. Maybe just after getting beat that bad, the team just decided to go home. They wanted to make an honest living back at the lumber mill and hang up the cleats. But more than likely, the company that sponsored the Cardex, American Cardex, had to dissolve the organization based off of loss of profit margin. As mentioned previously, it was very, very difficult for small-town teams, and so to attract enough interest for the team to continue. Now, don't think that this was the only team that had to go through this. That year in 1921, only 13 of 21 teams finished that actual season in the NFL. So it's not entirely out of the ordinary. Some local legends say that the Cardex did continue to play. There's whispers that a scrimmage occurred in 1925 from a team out of Rochester that played a team out of Tonawanda, but the last final record was just that absolute embarrassing loss in 1921, so we may never know. But the next time that you drive by Highmark Stadium, so maybe you're crushing a table in the Hammerlot, just know the Buffalo Bills were not the first professional football organization to break the hearts of Western New Yorkers. It's the Tonawanda Kardex, and may they live in infamy. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Just in case you didn't know, my name is Dan Mitchell. I regularly put out videos about the Buffalo Bills and the NFL. If that's your cup of tea, definitely consider subscribing and smash that like button. Thank you so much for tuning in, and before I let you go, you better always remember, let's go Buffalo.